You know, in the quiet that comes after a huge battle, when all the dust finally settles on the desert floor, that's when the real stories begin to come out. And they aren't stories about winning or losing, not in the way we usually think about it. No, these are stories about a promise that was kept. These are the stories of the Martyrs of Uhud, tales of a deal that was honored, and of a life that really, truly begins right at its worldly end.
Just try to imagine the scene for a second. The fighting is done, and the silence that follows is just heavy. You can feel the weight of the loss. For the early Muslims, this was a moment of just immense grief, a real test of their faith. And it brings up a question that's still so powerful today. What does it really mean to be true to a promise when keeping it is going to cost you absolutely everything?
So, let's start with the story of a man who perfectly captures this idea, Mus'ab ibn Umair. Now, back in his community, this guy was basically a symbol of wealth, of status, the whole 9 yards. But as we're about to see, his true riches had nothing to do with what he owned and everything to do with what he was willing to give up.
I mean, just look at this contrast. It's pretty stark, right? Mus'ab was famous for his fine clothes, always the best dressed. And yet, he left this world with nothing but a single, simple wool garment. And you might think, wow, that's a story of loss. But it's not. It was a powerful statement about what was truly important to him. It was proof that real success, it comes from being sincere to your promise.
And here's where the depth of his sacrifice it hits you. That final piece of cloth, the only thing he had left in the entire world, it was too small to be his shroud. It wasn't big enough to cover him. When his friends tried to cover his head with it, his feet were left bare. And if they covered his feet, well, his head was exposed.
Seeing this, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, gave this incredibly compassionate instruction. He told them, "Cover his head with the garment and place al-idhikar over his legs." Al-idhikar is this type of fragrant desert grass, a very humble burial for a man who had just achieved the greatest honor possible.
This theme of just absolute total sacrifice, it leads us right into our next story. This is the account of Hanzalah ibn Abi Amr. And his story, it teaches us about the urgency of faith and how sincerity is really measured by how quickly the heart responds.
So picture this. Hanzalah is a newlywed. He had just spent his first night with his wife. But as the sun came up, the call to defend the community went out, and Hanzalah, he didn't hesitate for a single second. He just grabbed his sword and ran to the battlefield. His response was so immediate, so fast, that he didn't even have time to perform the ghusl. That's the ritual bath that's required after intimacy. For Hanzalah, the call to duty, it came before absolutely everything. His sincerity was proven not just by the fact that he was there, but by how fast he got there.
And his sacrifice was honored in a way that is just miraculous. After Hanzalah fell in battle, the Prophet told his companions about a vision he had. He said he saw the angels themselves performing that ritual bath for Hanzalah, right there between the heavens and the earth, using pure water from the clouds in vessels made of silver. What an incredible, divine honor for an act of pure, immediate faith.
Okay, now let's turn to Sa'd ibn Arabi. This was a man who was found on the very edge of death, but his final moments gave everyone a peek into the unseen reality that was waiting for him.
You have to remember, in the chaos right after the battle, the Prophet was worried about Sa'd. So he asked one of the companions to go and search for him among all the fallen just to find out if he was still alive. When the companion finally found Sa'd, he was just clinging to his last few breaths. He'd been hit with 12 lethal wounds, from spears, swords, arrows, you name it. By any worldly measure, he was already gone.
But with his dying breath, he gave a message to be delivered to the Prophet. And it wasn't a message of pain or fear. It was a message of pure, overwhelming victory. He said, "I smell the fragrance of paradise." He was already experiencing the reward that he had been promised.
So here's the crucial point, right? All of these stories, they completely challenge our understanding of what life and death even are. And no story does this more powerfully than that of Abdullah ibn Amr, whose martyrdom actually led to a divine revelation.
Now, just like any son would be, Jabir was just heartbroken, weeping over his father's body. But when the Prophet came up to him, he didn't just offer simple words of comfort. He came with news that was about to reframe his father's death as the ultimate win.
The Prophet told Jabir something absolutely incredible, an honor that had been given to no one else. He said that Allah had spoken to his father, Abdullah, directly. No veil, no intermediary. A direct, intimate conversation with the divine.
And when Allah asked Abdullah what he wanted,
what he desired, his only wish was to return to the world just so he could be martyred all over again. The reward he was experiencing was so magnificent, so beyond comprehension, that his only desire was to earn it a second time.
From our perspective, though, the grief is real. The loss is something you can feel. So how do you reconcile that pain with the promise of a reward this huge? Well, the answer came from Revelation itself. This very verse was revealed because of this, and it commands us to completely change our perspective. It says, flat out, don't think of the martyrs as dead. They aren't. They are alive in a way we can't possibly understand, and they're being provided for by their Lord. For them, death isn't an end. It's a doorway to true, everlasting life.
And this brings us right back to the beginning. Standing over the body of Mus'ab ibn Umair, the man who gave up everything, the prophet recited this verse. It honors the people who were true to their promise. Some, like Mus'ab, have already fulfilled their obligation, and some, well, they're still waiting. It's the ultimate measure of a life lived for a higher purpose.
The stories from Uhud show us that true faith isn't about trying to avoid loss. It's about understanding what is truly worth living for and dying for. So they kind of leave us to think about the covenants in our own lives and to ask ourselves, what promise do we hold that can endure beyond a single lifetime?